What happens when Hollywood's loudest voice meets its quietest soul? Tom Cruise, movie legend, icon, and Scientology's most powerful voice, invited Keanu Reeves to join him. But Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't fight. He didn't even say no. He just gave an answer so calm, so unexpected, it left Tom speechless. This wasn't just about religion. This was about control, power, and one man who couldn't be moved. In a room built on pressure, Keanu stood still, and his silence echoed louder than any scream. This is the story they tried to keep quiet. And once you hear it, you'll never see them the same way again. Chapter 1. The Unexpected. In the world of Hollywood, power is often measured in box office numbers, global influence, and sometimes by who you can convince to follow your path. Tom Cruise, the charismatic and relentless face of Scientology, had a mission. And that mission wasn't in a movie script, it was real. His target, Keanu Reeves. But what Tom didn't expect was the answer Keanu would give. It was a warm summer evening in Los Angeles. The kind of night where stars glittered in the sky almost as much as they did down on Sunset Boulevard. Somewhere between the clink of fine wine glasses and the hum of black-tinted SUVs, a quiet message was delivered to a man who usually kept his circle small, his life private. Keanu Reeves. For decades, Keanu had been known as the enigma of Hollywood. A man who could carry billion-dollar action franchises, but still ride the subway home in silence. He avoided red carpet drama, skipped unnecessary interviews, and lived in a modest apartment while donating millions quietly. But this night, something different stirred. An invitation. It wasn't sent by an agent. It wasn't passed through a manager. It came directly from Tom Cruise himself. Tom Cruise, the undeniable powerhouse of action cinema, had also become the most recognizable face of Scientology. To some, he was a hero. To others, a mystery cloaked in glossy magazine covers and elusive doctrines. But regardless of the opinions, one thing was clear. Tom believed in his cause. And he believed Keanu would too, if only he gave it a chance. The dinner was arranged discreetly at a high-end restaurant where privacy was practically a second currency. No paparazzi. No interruptions. Just hushed voices, velvet booths, and waiters trained to disappear. Keanu arrived, dressed in his usual simple black attire. No entourage. No flash. Just presence. He greeted Tom with a calm smile, a light nod, and a handshake that spoke volumes, respectful but unreadable. Tom, ever the host, lit up with warmth. The two actors had brushed shoulders at award shows, industry galas, and movie premieres. But this was the first time it was just them, face to face. The evening began as one might expect between two Hollywood icons. They spoke about films, John Wick, Top Gun, the evolution of action cinema, and how stunts were becoming more real than ever. Tom praised Keanu's dedication, and Keanu complimented Tom's longevity. But beneath the pleasant surface, there was something deeper brewing. Tom wasn't just here to catch up. After the entrees were cleared, and the waiter had poured the last of the red wine, Tom leaned in slightly. His tone shifted, still warm, but now more focused. "You know, Keanu," he began, "I've always admired your stillness. You move through this world with such centered energy. You remind me of what drew me to Scientology in the first place." Keanu listened, his face still and patient. Tom continued, "I think you'd find it meaningful. The clarity it brings, the understanding of who you are beyond the noise. I'd love to invite you to meet some people, see what it's really about." A lesser actor might have responded with discomfort. Maybe nervous laughter. Maybe an immediate, "I'll think about it." But not Keanu. He simply sipped his tea. That silence wasn't awkward. It was powerful. Because Keanu wasn't thinking of a polite way to deflect. He wasn't scrambling for an excuse. He was listening, not to Tom, but to the silence within himself. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle, almost too soft for the setting. But his words carried weight. "Tell me more," he said. Tom's eyes lit up. He saw it as a door opening. And he stepped through it with passion. For the next 30 minutes, Tom painted a picture, one he had rehearsed many times. The foundations of Scientology. The journey through auditing. the transformation it had brought to his life. He spoke of energy, of freedom, of breaking away from emotional scars. His words were magnetic, flowing like a stream that had swept many before. Keanu nodded occasionally, his face serene. He didn't challenge. He didn't praise. He absorbed. When Tom finally finished, there was a pause again. A sacred pause. The kind you only hear when two people are on completely different frequencies, trying to find a common signal. Then Keanu leaned forward, just a bit. I think everyone's searching for something, he said. That hunger, that ache, it's everywhere. But I don't believe truth is something you sign up for. I think it's something you remember, something already inside you. Tom tilted his head slightly, intrigued. Keanu continued, I've sat with monks in Kyoto. I've meditated on rooftops in Toronto. I've read sacred texts, but I've also watched sunsets in silence. Sometimes, truth doesn't come in a system. It comes in stillness. It wasn't a dismissal. It wasn't arrogance. It was just, Keanu. Tom tried to gently bring the conversation back. But what if that stillness could be expanded? What if there's more waiting on the other side of the noise, through structured discovery? Keanu gave a slight smile, the kind that carries lifetimes of thought behind it. Maybe, he said, or maybe what we call structure, is just another version of noise. Boom. It wasn't what Tom expected. Most people were curious. Some were resistant. A few were defensive. But Keanu's response was a quiet refusal without rejection. A peaceful wall. One you couldn't climb with arguments or promises. It was like trying to sell the ocean to a man who already found peace in a raindrop. The conversation drifted after that. They moved back to cinema, to life, to favorite books and philosophies. But the tone had shifted. Tom realized he was speaking to someone who had already found his temple, not in a building or belief, but in his own soul. They shook hands. Tom thanked him for the evening. Keanu nodded with his signature stillness. Neither man was angry. There was no fallout. Just two paths that had briefly crossed, before heading in very different directions. What Tom learned that night was something no textbook could explain. Keanu Reeves wasn't resisting Scientology because he feared it. He didn't need it. Because Keanu's life, for all its tragedies and trials, had led him to a kind of spiritual independence most people only dream of. And no organization, no matter how powerful, could claim ownership of that. And so, the dinner ended. One man walked away with his mission unfulfilled. The other walked away unchanged, and that was the most powerful answer of all. Chapter 2. The answer that stunned Tom. The dinner had ended, but the silence between Keanu Reeves and Tom Cruise echoed louder than any applause either had ever heard on set. Tom Cruise had walked into that evening with confidence, charm, and a clear purpose, to welcome Keanu into what he considered a life-altering truth, Scientology. But Keanu's answer wasn't loud. It wasn't even argumentative. It was something far more difficult to counter. It was peace. Tom Cruise had just spent over 30 minutes passionately explaining the journey of Scientology. He spoke of the bridge to total freedom, of spiritual auditing, of freeing the soul from lifetimes of emotional baggage. To him, it was salvation. Not just for celebrities, but for anyone willing to dig deep and surrender to the process. And Tom wasn't just talking. He was offering Keanu a rare place within the inner sanctum of Hollywood's most secretive circle. Keanu had listened. Patiently. Calmly. And when the room fell still, Keanu finally spoke. I think everyone's searching for something, he had said, looking directly into Tom's eyes. But I don't believe truth comes in packages or titles. That moment hit harder than any stunt Tom had ever performed. He had expected skepticism. Maybe hesitation. Perhaps even a curious, tell me more. But he hadn't expected this, a response that sounded less like a rejection and more like a spiritual mirror. Keanu continued. I've read books that promised transformation. I've sat with monks who offered silence. I've lost people I loved, and I've found myself again in those losses. I don't think truth is something you join. I think it's something you notice, when everything else fades. Tom's face, so often confident and unshakable, faltered for a moment. Just a flicker. Just enough to know he hadn't planned for this. Keanu wasn't a preacher. He wasn't selling his own belief system. He wasn't positioning himself as superior. He simply wasn't searching. That's what made his answer so difficult to argue with. Tom attempted to clarify. But what if you're only seeing part of the picture, Keanu? What if there's more, something bigger waiting to be uncovered through auditing, through real spiritual work? Keanu paused, then smiled, not a dismissive smile, but a warm one, as if he had heard that question before, in many forms. Maybe, he said softly, but I don't think we're meant to chase the light. I think we're supposed to become it. It wasn't defiance. It was poetry. And it wasn't just what Keanu said, it was the way he said it. With no tension. No need to convince. No fear of consequence. Tom, for once, was speechless. The air between them changed. Not in hostility. Not even in disappointment. But in the quiet realization that Keanu couldn't be recruited, not because he was unwilling, but because he was already whole. And that wholeness was immune to persuasion. Tom Cruise had converted actors, businessmen, even royalty into the fold of Scientology. But tonight, he met a different kind of soul. Someone who had stared into the abyss of grief, losing his lover, his unborn child, his closest friends, and hadn't hardened. Someone who had walked through fame, temptation, and chaos, and hadn't been consumed. Keanu had become his own quiet doctrine. For Keanu, the dinner wasn't a battle. It was simply an encounter. One of many in a life, he had learned to live with gentle detachment. In interviews, he would later be asked, "What do you believe in?" His answer was always something like, kindness, stillness, the space between thoughts. No name of a religion. No club. No group. Just space. Photographers swarmed. Flashes lit up. Two legends of Hollywood under one roof again. They smiled. They shook hands briefly. But they didn't linger. Tom respected Keanu. That hadn't changed. But he now understood something unspoken. Keanu wasn't someone you bring into a system. He was someone who had already found peace outside of it. Some people seek belonging in temples. Some find identity in movements. Others, like Keanu Reeves, become their own sanctuary. That night, Tom Cruise walked away not with a new convert, but with a quiet revelation. You can't recruit someone who has already made peace with the mystery. And Keanu Reeves was the mystery. Chapter 3, Quiet Fallout, Louder Respect. After the dinner, there was no dramatic fallout. No viral headlines. No leaked conversations or tabloid chaos. But something had undeniably shifted. Tom Cruise, one of the loudest voices in Hollywood's most secretive organization, had tried to bring Keanu Reeves into the fold. And Keanu, he had declined, with the gentleness of a breeze that couldn't be caught. But in Hollywood, even silence makes noise. Behind closed doors, whispers traveled quickly. Tom's inner circle was surprised. Disappointed, even. They had believed if anyone could bring Keanu in, it was Tom Cruise. His charisma was legendary. His conviction, unshakable. But Keanu had politely refused, without ever saying the word, no. One senior member reportedly asked, was he hostile? Tom shook his head. He was peaceful. It's hard to argue with a man who doesn't need anything from you. That sentence would linger. Because that's what Keanu had become in their eyes, someone who couldn't be bought, pressured, or persuaded. A spiritual outlier. To the public, nothing seemed different. Keanu still rode the subway. Still quietly donated to children's hospitals. Still turned down luxury mansions and private jets. But for those in powerful circles, his refusal had ripple effects. They'd seen actors say no before, but not like this. Not with peace. Not with presence. And not without fear. For Tom Cruise, this wasn't a scandal. He still respected Keanu. How could he not? But he also realized something deeper, something perhaps uncomfortable. Keanu didn't need the answers Tom had spent decades chasing. He already had his own. When asked about spirituality, Keanu never claimed to have it all figured out. His answers were always minimal, profound. I think we're here to take care of each other. Energy doesn't die. It transforms. Stillness reveals more than noise. These weren't slogans. They were philosophies, earned through grief, reflection, and years of walking away from the spotlight instead of toward it. Most people would have collapsed. Some did. Keanu withdrew. Not from life, but into it. He found meaning in moments. Healing in silence. And that's why Tom's invitation didn't land. Because Keanu didn't need an escape. He had already walked through fire, and come out softer, not harder. The host cracks a joke, asking, "Ever try to recruit John Wick into Scientology?" Tom chuckles, a little tight-lipped. You can't recruit Keanu. He's already on a different frequency. The audience laughs. But those who knew the truth understood what that really meant. Two men. Two giants in Hollywood. But walking opposite roads. Tom needed structure. Keanu embraced surrender. Tom sought missions. Keanu found stillness. One crew member recalled, "We thought there'd be tension after the dinner. But when Tom and Keanu were on set for an awards campaign video later, it was just quiet. Respectful. Like two warriors from different temples. No bitterness. Just acceptance." The interviewer presses, "Do you belong to any faith, Keanu?" He smiles. Thoughtful. Present. "I believe in love. In impermanence. And in doing the right thing even when no one's watching." And that is why his answer stunned Tom Cruise. Because it wasn't defensive. It wasn't proud. It was simply whole. Keanu wasn't rejecting a belief system. He just didn't need one to find meaning. He had built his own sacred space, with grief as a teacher, kindness as a compass, and stillness as his guide. In a town built on image, Keanu's refusal wasn't a PR move. It was a reflection of who he truly was. Someone who had seen the edge of life and chosen to return with gentleness. Someone who didn't need to belong to a group, to feel connected to humanity. Tom Cruise may not have gotten the answer he hoped for. But he got something far more powerful. A glimpse into a different kind of freedom. No spotlight. No entourage. Just peace. In the end, Keanu Reeves didn't walk away from Scientology. He simply stood still. And in that stillness was the loudest answer of all. If this story made you think, if you felt the silence hit harder than words, then don't just watch. Like the video to show your respect for Keanu's quiet strength. Subscribe for more untold stories that Hollywood keeps behind closed doors. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Keanu's place? Because here, we don't just watch stories. We uncover the truth behind them.